again. I need to check and make sure that Facebook's running because it looks like Facebook didn't work the last time. Let's try this one more time. Let's catch this stuff, make sure that we've got things going. There we go. All right. Well, how do you like that? So, why is this not showing me? Wow, technical difficulties. Isn't this wonderful in live broadcasting? Technical difficulties. So I apologize for my Facebook folks. Apparently something happened with my with the technology, the restreaming technology, and it sort of bounced and kept you guys from seeing my first initial communication. So I apologize for that. So from that standpoint, just to kind of catch you back up, I was talking about a video, a advertisement for a mattress, and the mattress, I've seen two versions of it, and in both versions they have the male of the two mentioning that he wants the soft side of the mattress, and I personally I like a stiffer mattress. I'm kind of surprised that they did it in both versions. They did the same thing. It's kind of an interesting little thing, but that is completely off the topic that I was saying that you guys would be seeing tonight. And yeah, that is completely off that topic. So we are going to jump to that topic here in just a second. And I apologize again. I apologize to the people who are basically watching on Facebook. Apparently I had a had a technical difficulty. Isn't that amazing how things just don't seem to work perfectly all the time? So now I've got everybody up and running. Hopefully everybody is back on and able to lock back in, that kind of stuff. So I apologize for that. Okay, so tonight I want to take a break from what I normally do, the normal topics that I've hit in the last 4 or 5 episodes. We're going to take a little bit of a break from that, and we're going to take a break from reality. We're going to take a breather from reality. And I want you to step away from thinking about today's technology, even though, seriously though, I mean, today's technology is really great. If you think about this, just for those in my age bracket, for those that graduated in the 80s, just think of how much technology has occurred over the course of the last, 40 years, 30 years, 40 years, and just think about all of the wonderful things that have going on. I mean, I was talking to my son the other day about beepers and how beepers were the first things out and how you had to type in a number to get the person to call you back and those kinds of things. And he was just amazed at it. Of course, this was several years ago, but still, he was just amazed at it. I mean, just the fact that we've come so far with technology, it kind of makes you think a little bit further in terms of what is available today versus what was available when we were really growing up and starting to think about technology and that kind of stuff. So realistically, oh, wait a minute. Oh, you know what? I've got a problem here. My background doesn't reflect this technology, this discussion. So hold on. There we go. Got a little mood going on here. Got a little thing going on right now. So, in the 1960s, late 60s, early 70s, we had something go on that really got us kind of started, and one of the things that we had going was the fact that we had space travel. We had John Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon and we're going to get it at the end of the decade. And so the presentation of that and going to the moon was a really big deal. And we had never been outside of our atmosphere really. And so, the government started really looking at space travel. And so one of the things that I think was is really really cool to think about is the fact that in the 60s they started off with Star Trek, and then that kept going. I've actually even watched like some of the older stuff on Netflix and that kind of thing. I mean, Captain Kirk was the man, if you know what I mean, back in the day, and he was something to look at. And it was interesting to look at Gene Roddenberry's um, uh, idea of what a utopia would be like in the future. And so, from that, we ended up getting things like Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, you know, all of these different. And then, of course, the Star Trek franchise is still going on today. They still have new stuff coming out today that is sticking with Star Trek. And then you have the movies, and I mean, the whole franchise is just amazing. But the whole concept of coming out with new technologies and things in terms of stuff that we had never before seen. I mean, think about this in Star Trek in particular. You had things like the replicator system, where food was just you just said what you needed and it magically appeared. Now, back in the 60s television series, before we started getting some more modern stuff, that the food looked a little bland. I mean, you know it would come out, it'd be like little squares, colored squares, things like that. It wouldn't look all that fancy. And then, of course, when they moved on to the next generation, you ended up with the um, you ended up with the whole thing of um, having the food like Picard's tea Earl Grey hot kind of scenario. Um, so it's kind of interesting, realistically, that we ended up with a a somebody's vision of what the future looks like in terms of being able to envision different things. So here's a couple things that came out. I mean, not only was it space travel, the whole concept of the warp drive and being able to travel through space at a very fast clip, such that you could go to different areas of the galaxy. That, in and of itself, is pretty amazing. But here's one that I find very very interesting, and it's the teleporter, the transporter, being able to just beam yourself from one place to another, break yourself all down and then go from one place to another. It's something that is just amazing to me that type of technology was thought of way back when. And that was going to be the new thing. That was going to be the new way, new mode of travel. Now, I find it interesting, though, that within the ship, they still utilized things like lifts. And in some cases, they were walking. I mean, why wouldn't it be, you would just step onto a portal inside a room and just get beamed from place to place. There's got to be a reason, and I haven't actually researched it, but you know, even within some of the series, like they were able to do it. They would do it in emergency situations. They would beam from one place to another within the ship. They would beam themselves out there, but that wasn't the standard way of transport. The standard way of transport was still taking the lifts and walking. Now, this is, for an advanced society to be able to jump into the transporter and go that far, however it was, it tear apart all your bits and tear apart everything, and then you'd get combined back together, and you'd be right back in the same place. Just from a computing standpoint, just think of how much computing power it would take to do that in today's day and age, if we were to find a way to do that. Now that being said, I mean, Star Trek, Star Wars, looking to the stars, that was a really big thing to go with. But there's other stuff that we can talk about as well, that we can think about. I mean, this is suspending imagination. It doesn't necessarily have to deal with just the stars. I mean, it could be, looking at stuff like what's behind me? The Matrix. That's right. So in terms of reality and alternate realities and thinking about this stuff, you could be looking at, I mean, even, films like Men in Black. Men in Black did this too, because at the end of every single Men in Black series, they came up with something different. Like the first one, I think you were inside of a marble that was being played by an alien, and they were playing marble games. There was things dealing with the next one. I think they stepped out of a locker. There was ones where they came out of into different places. Anyway, I can't remember every single one, but still, the point being is that movies like The Matrix and like Men in Black, they make us question our understanding of the universe, and it's a suspension of belief that is just absolutely amazing to me, that somebody has the creativity to be able to come up with something like this. I mean, really, who would have seriously thought that we could be part of a battery for all things? I mean, I'm assuming that everybody has seen The Matrix, but you could be, humans are being utilized as energy and as batteries. I mean, wow. Really? Batteries. That's what we're being used for, and we're being told that we're complacent. I mean, even now, this show is an alternate reality. It could be something that is totally different. I mean, if you think about the existential thought process that it would take to even remotely imagine this stuff, it's just amazing to me. Amazing. It just to be able to think that way. Now, there's more to this than just, time travel and, things like that. There's more to space travel. There's more than space travel. I mean, there's movies that question even our own sensibilities today, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Okay, now that's a kid's film, all right, and that's one of those films that, you're shown a different world, and the whole purpose of the film is to actually present things to you in such a way that bad habits are in ugliness and that kind of stuff. It's supposed to be like a life lesson. But think about this. Step away from the plot of the movie. A guy finds creatures like the Oompa Loompas to fill in his factory to make his candy. And when he makes his candy, it's made with a magical sense of, different things. There's like the shoe, the one thing where he's putting in the shoe, and then he tests this other piece, and it's too cold, and so he throws in a coat. And then when the little girl tries the 5-course meal bubble gum, it transforms her into a very large blueberry. The chocolate river, the edibles in the first room that they go into, the soap bubble squeegee machine thing when they jump on the cart, and he opens it up and everybody gets all covered in the soap and everything, and he goes and runs them through a squeegee to make them come out dry on the other side. I mean, just imagine all of that possible. Suspending your belief in today's reality is in being able to look at some of these things. Now a lot of these are like older films. I mean, we've even got, some newer films, and I'm not just talking about like the Marvel Comics universe or any of the superhero films, because I mean, those are obvious, for the most part in terms of their magicality, but you have so many other things that you can think about. There's even time travel or dimensional travel. I mean, here's the TARDIS, Doctor Who. It's it's just amazing at all the different things, and being able to look at this and take a closer look at what we have going on, not in just today's society, but just being able to think and move outside the box and go to something new and something different. I mean, wow. Just like all kinds of things that are available, and you know, talking devices. Like back in the 80s, I don't know if you remember, but back in the 80s um, there was the whole kit, the Knight Rider 2000. And of course, that was, supposed to be like this super car that could do all kinds of things. It had a sentient thought process. It was a processor in his own mind. It could access databases wirelessly. It could turn itself into different things from a standpoint of, for an example, it could fake police car lights just by popping its lights up and down. But just the thought of that, even in today's standards, I mean, can you imagine how close we are to even just that? I mean, Google's been doing self-driving cars down in Arizona, and I know because I've been told that, and they've been testing these things. So there's self-driving cars, there's Siri that talks to us, we've got Alexa that talks to us. You've got we're right on the cusp, and if you think about this, there's just the suspension of disbelief to create something that is so brand new and so amazing. We are in a great time today because even just 20 years ago, we didn't have this stuff. I mean, think about this. One of the first video games that came out was Pong. And what do we have now? We have these high definition worlds that are, between first person shooters and even just following the games and stuff. We've moved from the whole idea of just a two-dimensional world into a three-dimensional world. I mean, I play video games with my son, and what happens? I have to figure out, head on a swivel. You can get hit from all sides, and not too long ago that wasn't the case. It was a video game was just two-dimensional. It was this side and this side, and you just kind of boom boom hit the ball back and forth. Or if you remember Dungeons and Dragons or whatever that was similar to it in the arcade world with Atari, and you had these maps, and you would have to walk from like this map and go through the whole maze and fight the guy, and then you'd go out the other side, and then you'd have to slide off the screen in order to initiate the next level. Well, now you can hit portals, and you can hit all these different things, and our technology has jumped so much that is it even possible that maybe we could have some of these things even within our lifetime today? Now, when it comes to things like the transporter, DeForest Kelly his character was Dr. McCoy, and he hated those things. He hated transporting. And that being said, I sit here and try to think, if we had the ability to do something like that, like being a transporter or transporting yourself somewhere, if we had that ability, what would you appreciate it? Would you even use it? I mean, some old guys like me, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if I want all my molecules spread throughout space. I mean, I'm in wireless technology. I understand a little bit about how to do things like break signals up into multiple streams and send them all at once and that kind of stuff. Sometimes they don't get there. I mean, if like my finger, let's say my pinky didn't make it, would they go and would the computer just automatically reset and like manufacture a finger? I mean, what kinds of specialized technology would it take to recreate that in case a part didn't make it. I mean, even now, just a second ago, I used this broadcast and I send it to one place and it separates it out to three different locations. And all three locations, I can tell you, even on my screen right now, some are in sync, some are in not, are coming in later, some are, it all depends on how fast the servers are getting stuff out there. And so you look at something like that and then you think about teleportation. I mean, I would certainly hope that they would have, gotten that out of the way, would have figured out how to make that go before they allowed it for use. But at the same time, is it something that you would want to do? Anyway, so let's take a step back from the whole fantasy idea, or, well, I guess sci-fi, really. And let's just think about something a little more fantastical, not from a science aspect, but just something. Here's an example. What I'm thinking of has to deal with the ability to maybe read other people's minds, as an example, or to be able to hear the thoughts of the people around you. I mean, scientifically speaking, the last number that I've heard is probably there's, a large portion of our brain that we're not even aware that we use, that it's not even a conscious thought in our mind. So what about this? What about if we were to be able to utilize more of our brain and we were able to have special powers such as ESP? Now, there's people out there that do claim that they have that now. They have extra sensory perception. And I have to admit that I've been in a couple of situations where, things have been felt a little hinky and I've kind of, figured out not to do what I was going to do or get myself out of that situation before. That's called instinct, I think. But I'm talking about being able to actually read someone else's mind or actually enact your thoughts onto somebody else's, some other object. Maybe not a person, but maybe just something else like, telekinetics, being able to lift things. I mean, suspension of disbelief can go anywhere. We can do anything within this world. Whatever it is that you want to make. And it doesn't even have to be superpower-ish. I mean, it really doesn't. It just being able to do things that you normally wouldn't be able to do is the big thing about these fantasy worlds. And you can go as big as you want or as small as you want, and it doesn't take a lot. But if you just think about the amazing things that we have, the exposure that we have, let's not even go to the idea, well, maybe, well, let's go ahead. Let's go to this point. How about dimensions? How about being able to move outside of the three dimensions that we know exist? I mean, scientists have been talking about a fourth dimension for years, and there have been some movies and TV and stuff like that have addressed the additional dimensions. I mean, I think actually even there was a Star Trek Next Generation episode where Wesley Crusher ended up going with a race of beings that could step outside of time because they came from a different dimension. And so there have been some discussions around that. So what kinds of things could you think of in that sense? And speaking of time, not just time travel, but being able to stop time, there was an old film, and I can't even really remember the name of it, but I think Pam Dauber was in it. And it was about this stopwatch that when this button was clicked, it would significantly slow down time to the point where it would almost stop. And, she was able, or whoever was holding the watch was able to go around and do different things. And of course, the teenager in me really liked the one time where she walked up and she took this girl's who was being a real mean girl, and she untied her bikini top. And of course they didn't show any of that, but it was comedy for that particular show. But just think about the capability. If you had the capability to slow down time, and or even better yet, you could be like the Flash and move faster in time, such that you would find you could do different things. So there's a lot of different stuff that we could go. Now, for me, if I'm asked this question, there are so many different possibilities. I mean, there's space travel. So let's look at space travel real quick. I mean, SpaceX is already starting to work on things to sending stuff into space from the public sector. It's no longer just the governments that do this. It's no longer just NASA. And they're trying this out. So if the opportunity were to come up to be able to travel into space, and I can tell you already, I'm too old to be an astronaut. I'm definitely not in shape to be an astronaut. So I wouldn't be asked, I don't think, to be an astronaut. But if the opportunity came up to go into space, would you take it? Would you take the opportunity to go into space? Now let's go even one step further. You have the potential of the Mars mission coming up. Okay, so you have the potential of the Mars mission where you could be sent as an astronaut to Mars. The kicker here is that because it takes so long to get there, and because of the fact you wouldn't be able to come back, you're stuck there for the rest of your life. Is that something that you would want to jump on? Is that something that you would want to take? I personally, I have too much invested down here. Way too much invested down here. I probably wouldn't want to go. If I were younger and single and that kind of stuff, that totally changes the proposition. But even that is amazing. Even that is something that is, could be considered mind-boggling. So let's go even on one step further. So, can't remember the name of the movie. Again, we're talking, this is a really old movie, but even the theme has hit, especially like in the superhero movies. Shrinking yourself down. We have like the Incredible Shrinking Woman. We have the one where there was a movie that I can't remember right now, but they shrunk these people down and they injected them into this guy's body as a medical procedure. So they took this ship and they went and they drove it around in his blood. There were scenes of like the antibodies attacking him, attacking the ship and stuff like that. And how they were going to get out before they ran out of time and would like expand and would have killed the guy. I mean, just to have those kinds of thoughts is just amazing to me. And then of course, to be able to create the detail, to have those thoughts and create the detail. So suspension of disbelief. So, yes. Fantastic Voyage. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was one of my watchers, Kirk, on Facebook. Fantastic Voyage. Thank you. I've got another one for you. I actually have another one for you. This is, sorry, I'm gonna go down a rabbit trail here real quick, just because I happen to have some people here that might remember. So there was this one 80s show. This has been bugging me all week. There was this one 80s show, and this one character, he was basically a spy. He was able to present information to the main character to, move the plot along. The guy, I don't remember his actual name, but they always referred to him as Kermit. Now, it's not Kermit the Frog. And if I do a Google search on Kermit, that's all I get is Kermit the Frog. I even try to like remove the frog out of the search and I still don't get it. But it was an 80s show, 80s, late 80s, maybe early 90s. And he always drove around in this green sports car, and he wore these glasses with green lenses. So if you happen to remember that one, send me an email, please. This has been bugging me forever. The email address would be Rick at whiskeymusings, all one word, .net or .online. If you can figure that out, I would really appreciate it, because unfortunately in my older brain is getting fogged on that. But anyway, okay, enough of the rabbit hole. Let me get back to where we were. So we also have the things out there from time travel. You've got space, you've got dimensional changing and travel. You have other worlds and other alien life forms coming here. I mean, the day the Earth stood still was one that pops up. I mean, this alien comes to the planet. It's not even us that has the special ability. It's the other races. They come down to our planet and they stop us. Now, granted, the premise of the movie has to deal with the plot itself has to deal with the fact that we are destroying our planet. And so they came to, save us from ourselves, kind of thing. But having different abilities to stop time, change matter, change space, change whatever. I mean, these are what these movies are made for. They are made for us to escape. Television shows are made for us to escape into an alternate universe, an alternate reality, something totally different, to be able to entertain us and in some cases even bring us a common bond. I mean, common bonds. You've got the Trekkies, and you've got all the people who believe Star Trek is better than Star Wars, and you've got the Star Wars people. I mean, now think about this: Star Wars. All right, so I've been leaning on Star Trek a lot. I'm going to move over to Star Wars now. Star Wars. Now think about this: you have beings that can tap into this existential force. They call it the Force. It's like this existential power conduit. The Force is all around us. It binds us. It keeps us together. They say that in the movies. It's almost like a bit of a religion, and it's represented as such. But it's this being able to tap into the world and the energy surrounding us to be able to manipulate our world and manipulate everything that we do. And I mean, they pick things up, they throw them, they move things around, they take things that are bigger than other objects. I mean, there's that classic scene with Yoda and Luke is trying to get the X-Wing fighter out of the swamp, and Yoda just looks at him and says, "Look at me, I'm small. Let me show you how it's done." And he goes ahead and does it, It's being able to have that possibility, that fantasy, to be able to have that. And then the other thing that I think is personally really cool, and I wish that we could figure out a way to do this, but it's a lightsaber. I mean, think about this: a sword that is made of energy that can cut through anything, and they use it in different ways. It's not just, a sword that can like cut through stuff. Although heating things up and that, I mean, that's a natural for this thing, but it's small, it's compact. The energy that it takes, I mean, it goes through these heavy metal doors in the one of the newer ones. Qui-Gon Jinn shoves it through the door and like melts the door around it. But yet it doesn't harm anything when it goes by it. I mean, it's not like it's this energy that like burns things up all when it goes by. It's contained. So that's a technology that's there. And it defends against blasters and being able to, they talk about how they have the forethought. They can see seconds into the future. They see things right before they happen. And that whole thing, they see things right before it happens, and that's how they know what's going to happen. That's just, suspension of fantasy and disbelief, and you're brought into this world, and these are all things, there's stuff that I probably couldn't even imagine realistically. I mean, I'm adventurous and everything, and I used to play with Legos, build stuff, that kind of stuff, but that's just standard stuff. These guys, these people create these fantasy worlds, and then, I mean, I've been talking about movies and TV. What about things like J.R.R. Tolkien and his Middle Earth? I mean, it's won awards for as um, amazing as what it is. The fact that he gets so detailed with the characters. In fact, I in fact couldn't even finish the whole series. I got through The Hobbit. I did the Lord of the Rings, or not the Lord of the Rings series. The Hobbit, the Fellowship of the Ring, and the Two Towers. I got like halfway through it twice, and I got lost because it was so detailed. And to be able to have that and create these fantasy worlds where things are just wherever you want, whatever you want. To create these things is just, it's astounding to me to be able to step out of reality and to move into this future. Just amazing to have that forced sight, that thought process. And I suppose if I were to sit down and actually, possibly do this, I could potentially come up with something that detailed. But to be able to do that and create this whole world based off of nothing. I mean, not even like scientific fact. Because think about like Gene Roddenberry. We didn't really have space vehicles back then. I mean, we didn't even really think about going to space. And even so, the space vehicle that we had wasn't that great. I mean, we were dealing with, Sputnik and that kind of stuff. I mean, that was kind of in the same time frame. And I'm sort of generalizing in terms of ages here and timelines, but just the whole concept of being able to step out and create these worlds is just astounding to me. Now, I've been asked about the whiskey that I'm drinking. So here's the thing, and maybe I should explain this. So we're going to kind of step away from the topic for a second. So I have tried bourbon. I've tried scotch. And bourbon's okay. I'm actually okay with it. I mean, I can drink Jack. I've tried Jim Beam, not really too much of a fan, but scotch, every scotch that I've tried, and I've had people who have been like, oh, you've got to try this. But it seems like every scotch that I've tried has always tasted to me like it's a bottom of an ashtray. I mean, I'm sorry. It just does. It just, for whatever reason. I mean, I'm not all that discerning. But that being said, I stumbled across the Irish whiskey. And so the Irish whiskey, which is what I've got here, Jameson's. That's what I've got. So what I have in particular, I am partial to the Black Barrel. Partial to the Black Barrel whiskey. I've tried cask makes. I can drink it. I've tried regular Jameson. I can drink that. But Black Barrel is my go-to. So, Jameson, Black Barrel. That's my go-to. So we also have, as far as books are concerned, I mean, there's a suggestion here about J.D. Robb books. Death series, the settings in 2065 with cars flying over other vehicles. Oh, ooh, cars, flying cars. Yes, the resolution to traffic. Maybe. Considering flying cars, though, considering flying cars and considering today's drivers, Not quite sure I'm going to really appreciate that one. I mean, people would really have to like clean up their act. Hmm. Flying cars. Well, flying cars for me. How about that? How about I'm the only one that has a flying car? That'd be cool. Although, I have thought about doing like helicopters and stuff. And I guess some of this conversation and everything kind of leans me also toward things like, you know, back in the day, and I don't remember if it was Oregon or Washington, but back in the day, they used to have a thing where they would say $1 worth of dreams for the lotto. And the newest slogan here in Washington is "Let's imagine together." And some of the ads that have come out are like people who, fill up a swimming pool with ranch and they're jumping and diving in and all that stuff. I mean, well, shoot, that's a suspension of disbelief. I mean, winning that and spending your money on that, I personally wouldn't, but you could. You could. I mean, think about this. You could have all kinds of different things that you could do. Whether it's, you know, Star Trek, they didn't have money. I mean, other places did. Star Wars did. Star Wars had the little galaxy, the chips from the government. Um, Battlestar Galactica had them. I mean, Starbucks and Apollo were constantly betting on games and gambling. But that being said, you could also deal with things where we don't need money anymore. I mean, Star Trek, everybody worked, but nobody had any money. You didn't have to worry about it. You didn't have to pay for anything. You just sort of walked into a bar and you went and think about this. You walk into a bar and you get your glass of whiskey and you drink your glass and you leave. You don't have to pay for it. Not quite sure how that would go, but all right, whatever works. Flying off planet within hours and not days. Well, we kind of do that now with hours, but to be able to do it on a regular basis, a lot more than what we do, that would be pretty cool. I think it would be kind of cool if SpaceX were to set up a vacation on the moon. I mean, if we were to put a fully enclosed vacation hotel on the moon, to me would be pretty cool. I mean, could you imagine Great Wolf Lodge and being able to be weightless on the moon? Doing things, just imagine a trampoline park up there. I mean, wow, that would be pretty cool. And that actually might be attainable. That could be attainable. I mean, that's an idea. It's an idea, but it would take, I mean, obviously it would cost billions to go, but, and then you have another film like Total Recall. Total Recall has people actually living on Mars. And we keep talking about living on Mars because we think there's water there. We've sent the Mars rover there. But I think all of this is predicated on the fact of whether or not we can actually, technologically wise, get to the point where we can do this. But still, just from a fantasy aspect of being able to figure out how to do these things. And fantasy isn't just in the modern era. I mean, if you think about it, we've had other people. Jules Verne wrote about the journey to the center of the earth. And there's people who actually have believed and have chased that down. They've gone after it. They've tried to find it. The Vernians, I guess, is what they're called. But he even wrote 1,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I mean, that we're doing today. We're doing submarines. We still haven't explored our planet either. Come to think about it, I mean, I've heard the whole concept of Bigfoot as an example, is that there's this creature that lives out in the woods, lives in far remote places. And I was reading, this was a while ago, but I was reading the other day about a article that said that there are places around Mount Rainier, right here in Washington State, around Mount Rainier, that have never seen humans. So is it Is it possible that Bigfoot could exist? I would say it's possible. Is it probable that he hasn't been, quote, seen in a while? Well, yeah, there's always that. But I mean, think about it. Think like holographics, the holographic deck, vacation from home. I mean, this would be really helpful here in the COVID era, but the holographic deck and holographics. And I can remember when they first came out with this, there was this holographic game and it was pretty cool. You know what? I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to this one since I'm on that there. I want to change my background. So the holographic game that I remember, it was like a wild Western guy, and he was the holographic guy, and you had to like tell him to shoot or something. I don't know. The game was really simple back in the day, but it was holographic projection, and that was what was cool about it. Was that there was this dome, and it was this thing, this dome, and you had this projection in there, and if you looked around it and looked at different angles, sometimes it would just disappear because of the way that the cameras were. But holographics, and to be able to turn it into something, you could walk into this huge warehouse, and the minute you walked in, you could program it to do something and it would turn into this virtual world. Could you imagine that? I mean, you could go places that you hadn't been, experience different things that, of course, it's computer generated, but still, just being able to step out of reality. And we have some of that in virtual reality goggles now. That wasn't that long ago. So we could be talking about going to another planet. We could be talking about doing different things. We could have driving cars. We could have flying cars. We could have, computers that talk back to us. We're already there. And this was stuff that back in the 60s, as an example, back to Star Trek. I'm leaning a lot on Star Trek. I'll be honest with you, but they'd walk up to the computer bank and they'd just say computer, and they would ask it to do something, and it would working, and then it would come back with the answer. And we're there. We are there. These people created this stuff in the past, and here we are today with some of those things happening. This is an amazing time to live. And just think, the amount of computer power needed to power the Apollo mission control computers is in right here today. It's right here. This has more power than that. I mean, even Bill Gates got caught in this. Bill Gates, Mr. Microsoft himself, famously said, why would you ever need more than, and I don't even remember however amount of memory that you need. Why would you ever need more than that? And here we are, decades later, and we're still reaching for more power. I mean, I've seen processors come out in computers now that, quad core processors and 6 core processors and 8 core processors. And I know the non-technical people that are on this channel that are watching right now are probably going to sit there and go, what are you even talking about? But the reality is that we are advancing so fast and so quickly that some of these fantastical ideas that we've had, that we've generated through TV and movies and things like that, that they could come true. I mean, lickable wallpaper. That was in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I can remember a candy that came out that was rice paper, and it was flavored. And it was flavored. Flavored paper. Seriously? I mean, just think of all the things that we've done just in the last 20 years. This is just 20, 30 years, just within my lifetime. I mean, heck, my mother didn't even have a color TV. We created color TV, and now we've got these thin TVs. My kids were trying to set up the Wii. We still have a Wii. We have an old one. But they were trying to set up the Wii, and they tried to find a TV that actually had the 3 RCA connectors, the video and the audio left and right. We don't even have that anymore. We've got HDMI now and DVI and all these like high definition stuff. Just just within the last 10 years, that's changed. I mean, there's so much here. So, what kinds of things could you want? What sort of things? Let's take an imaginary break and let's look and try and figure out what other things that we could do. And I can remember as a kid, this was probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And well, okay. I wasn't a kid back then. Totally off the subject. I wasn't a kid back then 10, 15 years ago. But anyway, I do remember thinking, and I wish that I had penned this down because this would have been really kind of cool. There was a television show that came out. And one of the things that I do remember thinking about was the fact that what would happen if you could do things and other people could do things that you wouldn't normally do. Okay. So in my particular case, I mean, it was, what if you could force someone, let's say for an example, you could just look at somebody and say, I'm going to marry you. Okay. I'm going to marry you. And they had no choice. They had to marry you. And at the same time, somebody else could look at you and go, well, I'm going to marry you. You're going to be my wife or husband or whatever. And the funny thing about it was a few years after I had that thought, the television show, I think it was called Paradox, started advertising. And the thing that I found that was so interesting was that, and this is going to sound like I'm a creeper, but anyway, I was sitting here and I was thinking, what if we lived in a world where, you could just have sex with anyone you wanted, and other people could just have sex with you anytime they wanted. I mean, that would be kind of a screwed up world. It really would. And I don't even remember why that thought crossed my mind. But the funny thing about it was that Paradox show, they advertised that. I should have jumped on that. I'm telling you, I should have jumped on that. That Paradox show was my thought process exactly, but just a couple years later. And it was just very, very odd. And so, the human mind, the human psyche has such a way to create imaginary text, imaginary subtext, imaginary thought processes. We could do all these different things, thought processes going through our minds. And this is all stuff that allows us to happen because we're such a wonderfully built being to create all of this stuff. I mean, somebody somewhere, here's something else too that you may not know. So everybody depends on Wi-Fi. And a lot of people don't know this, but the actress Hedy Lamarr, she was a very, very smart woman for her time. Very smart woman, period. But she actually created the basis for frequency hopping spread spectrum technology that we have used in Wi-Fi and are still using it today. Now, all it takes is just a little bit of courage and a little bit of forethought to create and imagine. Now, granted, she was looking at it from more of a radar perspective, but still, with technology and the way that we've been doing leaps and bounds, we can do all of these things. We can create all of this stuff. We can present all of these things in different formats. Just amazing to me to be able to sit here and talk about some of the things that we've dealt with. I mean, microwaves, televisions, cell phones. Seriously, we used to have to go to find a phone. This is just in my lifetime. If I wanted to call home when I was a kid, I had to go to a neighbor's house to call home. My kids don't even know about that. What it doesn't feel like to have this thing in our hands. To be able to call and have instant contact. That's something that didn't happen 30 years ago. I mean, it's just amazing. Amazing to me. And even this technology here that I'm dealing with right now, that I'm putting this stuff on behind the screens to me, to be able to reach out, to send it to you. Even that is brand new. and amazing. So we should take this time to think about that. Just be amazed at the things that we have and try to remember the things that we possibly could have down the road. It's just phenomenal. We live in a phenomenal time. And we've been doing leaps and bounds and just incredible, incredible time frame. Collect calls. Yes, Ken, collect calls. I do remember collect calls. Do you remember party lines? Do you remember party lines? I remember party lines. A friend of mine had a party line to where, and for those of you that don't know, party lines basically were where one telephone number was shared between multiple houses or multiple people. And so you would call that number and hope that the right person or the right family picked up the phone. And if they didn't, you would have to ask for that person. I mean, you still would have to ask for that person regardless of whether, because you didn't know whether that was the person on the phone or not that you wanted to talk to. But the party line was even worse, because if it wasn't their call, they could, what was it? I think they had to like double tap the little hang up button, and then it would transfer over to the other person or the other party. Anyway, I don't remember, but party lines, having this singular number, the singular number for everybody is just, I mean, I can call and I know that if I dial my number, or if I dial my mom's number, if I dial my wife's number, I'm going to get my wife. I'm going to get my mom. I'm going to get my kids. We can text, we can video chat, we can communicate. Even that was a fantasy in the 60s, to just touch a button. Do you remember Star Trek? They touched their little button and they said, and they'd say Mr. Worf, and he would talk. Or not Mr. Worf. Mr. Worf was Next Generation, but it would be like, Spock or whatever. Or they had the little flip deals. I don't know. But even that, like even in today, I mean, if you've gone to some hospitals, they have a badge. It's called Vocera. And they can press this button on the Vocera badge and they can say, call Dr. whoever. And it would go and it would find that person and send it to that person. I mean, this is systems that we have today that I would like to think were inspired by somebody's dream, somebody's futuristic dream. Amazing time. This is an amazing time. Technology being what it is. And before I end tonight, I want to ask this question. And this is something that was brought up actually by Thor. But the key here is the question: the difference between technology and magic is realistically not that much different, because the technology of today would have been yesterday's magic. And there was a movie that I saw where this guy, he ends up going back in time, and he goes back to King Arthur's era. And of course he's, in with Merlin and King Arthur and that kind of stuff. And they view him as an outsider because he comes from the modern world. And so they don't recognize his abilities. But he sits there and he remembers, as a part of the movie, he remembers in the almanac a specific date in time when the moon goes into a solar eclipse. And so that specific point in time happened to be about the time that he was there. And so he told everybody, he's like, I'm going to make the moon move across the sun. And the solar eclipse happened, and everybody else was like, oh, I can't believe that happened. And then the other thing that he does is he goes and he takes a match of all things, and lights it with his thumbnail. And he makes fire onto a stick, or at least that was in their mind. And that's chemistry. Chemistry, physics, medical advancements that we have today, all of these things were fantasies many years ago. They were all futuristic, out of box thinking. They were things, people used to do bloodletting for miladies. They would cover people with leeches. This is all fantasies, and yet here we are today with technology, and we now know that that doesn't do anything. So enjoy today. Enjoy what we're learning, what we're doing today. Experience things today. When you step into that movie theater, just understand that the movies and the television shows, they are somebody's imagination, but it's not that far off. It may not be that far off before that stuff becomes true. Now, I'm not totally sold, again, on the transporter idea. Probably going to be that old fuddy-duddy if that ever shows up, who doesn't want to get into the thing. But that being said, just think that it could happen. Or we could end up like Jeff Goldblum's character in The Fly. I'm going to leave you with that. You all have a great night. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll come back next week. Follow us on Twitter. Watch us on Periscope TV, on YouTube. And I'll talk to you later. Enjoy your weekend. And I'll see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast.